I argue that these alien logics are colonial logics. They're logics of perpetual extraction or erasure, exploitation. Maybe it's about categorization, because when you go to a country where the people are used to using this particular tree as a form of medicine, a form of food, a form of clothing, whatever, and then you say, well, this tree is called according to its physical characteristics, and I'm going to put it in this category, in this class, and that gives me now permission to fell it and carry it off. This is the beginnings of death of ecologies, this categorization, this renaming, which Sai referred to as the epistemicides, the dispossessions and accumulations. These things define colonization and its extensions, coloniality, modernity, and subsequently capitalism. Another way for an ecology to die is by preventing it from being considered in relation, being relational, and then imposing on it categorical and absolutist forms, which is the universality of modernity. We have to give these trees, these plants, this soil, names in Latin, because it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, what other names would you give them? Really, what other names than a dead European language? So this is a particular way that's generated by a culture whose framing modality is to conquer and to colonize. This prevents the indigenous from reasserting its own eco-logic and therefore resilience in the face of objectification. So with this question here, which talked about an international perspective on the climate, I say there is not such a thing. There's no international perspective, writ singular, but there is a universalist narrative. And it's based on this scientific method, which is rooted in colonial structuring and profit-making. It negates and erases all the other cosmologies found across the pluriverse, the many worlds that exist upon this one planet, that are rooted in the ways of people that have maintained an ecological order that the environmental charities discover as they colonize territories which they mark to be in service to the developed world. So that the Amazon becomes in service to the whole globe under a universalist narrative. It ceases to have meaning locally. Yeah? That absenting of meaning means that it becomes then available to the whole world to do other things too. I recall working for, I won't name the charity, but going to a place in Africa and discovering 7 new varieties. They're discovering that you would use that kind of language in the 20th century, but they discovered 7 new varieties of fish as if the people there had never tasted them. And in discovering these 7 new varieties of fish, they felt it worthwhile to actually remove the villagers from the forest, because they now became a risk to what they were discovering, which was important for science. And I want to know, who is this science? What does he wear? Okay, I'm being timed. I may just resist. So, like the earlier chattelization of bodies for mining, plantations, material processing, the extraction of value from the earth is based upon it first being dehumanized, as were the bodies. That is to say, the earth itself is reduced to an order of being which only has value as commodity for material extraction to serve the purposes designed by colonizing agents. So when we talk about climate justice, I mean, the climate's all right, thank you very much, in a way. What is wrong is with us, but we don't take responsibility for that injustice. The weather is the weather. What the weather is trying, the weather as a system conjoined, if you like, becoming the climate, what it's trying to do is to act against the offences of humans. It's trying to rebalance. A tsunami is an appeal for help. It's a call. It's like a cancer in the body. The earthquakes, the volcanoes are rebalancing. It's the earth speaking, but we are failing to listen because we're not indigenous. We'll leave that to other people to deal with until, of course, it comes and hurts us here. So climate justice as social justice. I see these things as a tautology because the earth too has a social life, if you like. Is the word climate a place marker for the broader ecology of the earth, including the human? The way that the climate discourse has been used by those who have power over its usage, we understand that what is really being said when we speak of climate justice is simply justice. We desire that each ecology be regarded as unique, as well as relational with each other. We wish for the human to be understood in the ways that our cosmologies understand the human as integral to ecology in a cooperative or an Ubuntu way. And Ubuntu is saying, I am because we are, and we are because I am. There's a flow. It's like continuous. There's no interruption. We desire autonomy over our relationships with the earth, which we have spent thousands of years cultivating, those relationships. Where and when we are to be found in diasporas, in colonial countries, we ask that we have equity and justice and living conditions so that we too can practice our resilience and thrive in ways that any other human should be able to do in any place that they are found. It is unjust for us, for our bodies, to be expected to mop up the worst of your environmental mismanagement, both in the countries from which we originate, as well as when we come to live in your lands. Colonial histories and the key mechanisms of coloniality determines that we continue to be expropriated, and that the dehumanization of the parts of the earth that we are to be found in through extractivism, erasure, ecocide and genocide, such as happened since the dawn of the Anthropocene, has caused the earth to seek rebalancing with the floods, the tsunamis, the earthquakes and volcanoes. And all of this together with the draining of the life force and the toxification of the soil and waters through fracking and drilling, oil spills, mining residues, and the toxins coming out of processing, has led to the humans resident in these areas to seek solution to their displacement upon the earth, to migrate to places that have always been held up as places ahead of the curve, as progressive in terms of colonial time, and having higher ethics in terms of systems of law and order. But what we have actually found is a people who have been for some time dispossessing its own citizenry of its autonomy around earth-based activities, and who have created, that is through the enclosures, and who have created denuded soils through industrial agriculture and massive urbanization. Urbanization means you're exporting all the goodness of the soil to the city, and you're only replacing it with artificial chemicals. So this is why our foods taste of nothing, and why we're more likely to be toxified by the foods we're eating, even though they're claimed to be fresh, often stored for a whole year. So that these are people for whom colonial time is part of the confusion of class inequities which pre-existed us when we came, but into which we have fallen as easy prey because we're easily identified by this same culture for whom appearances are key markers of status. We have witnessed that in these cultures, the traders of things have objectified parts of life. They have specialists who translate all and any value into a cash value, and in so doing, the humans have lost their connections with their sensory environment and can only see or hear to a lesser extent, and so their own agency is greatly diminished. So this small minority is able to capture all value for itself, and it can make rules and regulations, and it can promote fake news, and it can objectify distortions in reality in the same systemic ways in which that coloniality is practiced. The natives of this land do not recognize what is happening to them because of disinformation, because of miseducation. After all, there is no holistic history being taught. It's only now that we're talking about, well, we should teach about British Empire. But I'm wary of that, because I wonder who will be teaching it and what angle they'll be coming with. But then, because there's a mass avoidance also, and this is something worth discussing, of perpetrator violence trauma. I'll say that again. There's a mass avoidance of perpetrator violence trauma. And this inability to face the trauma that arises out of those who have perpetuated mass violence all over the earth, to people and to the earth, leaks out in toxic ways across the wider system, creating hostile environments, amongst other things, misunderstanding the idea of refugee, not understanding displacement and its causes, such as that which Leon has talked about. So if we really want to go for an activist solidarity.
That's the next question. I love how you brought in the decolonial time, so I couldn't find the time. Oh, snap. But yeah, before we pass it over to the audience, because we do want to decolonise the format, because it usually is perceived experts at the front, and we want to come into a circle and kind of hear everyone's views, because we recognise there's so much knowledge within the room. But because we've invited Mama Lee up from London and from Birmingham today, Birmingham, Leon, we're giving them this time. I'll just pick up, because I know you've probably got some responses as well in your minute. But yeah, because we're talking about this concept of time at the university. Race Justice were invited to give a talk there, and the idea of, like you say, we live under a system that's unnatural, and I was learning from Dr. Wayne Chandler, who talks about time a lot in one of his books, Ancient Future, and he talks about how the number 13 is powerful, and that's recognised as such